this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I've always been a fan of geography. I was a fan of maps for years. I would look at any map, and I think that may have translated over to my son, because now my son is a GIS major. You know, he does the geospatial information system stuff, and finishing up college right now. I'm so proud of him. And he makes maps. That's kind of cool, I think. And he studies satellite imagery and all of that. But one of the things I've always been fascinated with regarding maps are looking at the origins of things. And specifically, you say, well, Morgan, how can a map have an origin? Well, the map itself has an origin. But what I'm talking about are bodies of water, particularly moving bodies of water. And those are, most of the time, where they originate from. Those are called headwaters. Today, I want to talk about the headwaters of one of my favorite locations in the world. And my buddy Dave Mack will attest to this. And that's the Coosa River. The Coosa River starts way north of where I live now, but I enjoy it all the time on my old boat that I've got. But the Coosa River flows through a lake, and it's a world-famous lake, actually, for a very specific kind of fish called crappie. Yeah, you heard that term right. Crappie, crappie. South Louisiana would call them sacolé. But what I want to tell you about is something that happened in an RV park many, many years ago, involving one of the most notorious mass killers in the history of the South. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I always talk about it. You know, I love my boat, man. I love my boat. I love my wife. I love my son and my daughter. I love my grandbabies.
But your feelings for your boat go even deeper, don't they?
Ooh, I tell you what. But you know, the case that literally, I'm doing a disservice by saying case.
Yeah.
Boy, I got to use not just little plural. I got to use gigantic plural today.
Man, you know,
because we're talking about cases.
Talking about Mark Barton and the guy who pulled off, I don't know if that's not the right term, but the guy who committed the worst mass casualty shooting in the state of Georgia. And that wasn't all he killed. That wasn't the only time that when we talk about a mass killer of going in and killing a bunch of people in one day or one spot, he is that guy. But besides those that he killed in one spot, or two spots in a general vicinity in Atlanta, he had already killed 3 others previous to that and 2 others previous to that, separated by a number of years. Mark Barton, when I dug into this story, is the filthiest, disgusting killer I've ever seen in all of the dealings we've had to deal with, Joe, because he doesn't kill in just one way. I don't know if you would call him a spree killer, because he certainly kills his own family members. He kills the people that he's closest to, and then he kills people because he believes that they did him wrong in business. This guy, if he wasn't already gone from this earth by his own hand, he would have been killed in prison because of all the damage he did to innocent people who had nothing but love for the guy.
Yeah, and he's look, I'm not going to diminish in any way. Anyway, I'm going back to your comment about prison. If he had survived to that point, he's a child killer too.
Yes.
I mean, he is a child killer. He killed buku adults, but his
and
own
quite
children.
Possibly a child molester.
Yeah,
you know that?
Yeah. I'd heard.
Digging through this story,
yeah.
his daughter at 2.5 years old, not in the middle of a divorce or a custody issue or anything else, she uttered to a teacher at daycare that her daddy molested her, and there was an investigation. Now, I know I'm putting the horse ahead of the cart, isn't what you're saying? But that was one of the many things I found out when we're talking about a child killer. This guy is I didn't realize how bad he was, Joe. I mean, I know we're dealing with a murderer, but sometimes, sadly, we detach when somebody does something that just seems to be like a shotgun approach to life. You know, they just indiscriminately shoot people that they don't really have a personal connection with, that somehow we separate those types of killers from those who do kill a family member, somebody they have a relationship with, or the types of the way that they kill. Normally, when we have somebody who has committed more than one murder, they do have their own SOP. They've got their own standard operating procedure or modus operandi, however you say these things. You know that. I mean, they do kill. They prefer a certain method, and they stay down that path.
They do. And, you know, one of the things that, and this, listen, this term, maybe it had been prior to me. I don't know everything. And if you ever come across somebody that claims they do, run away. Don't walk. Run away as fast as you can from somebody that says they know everything. I'll admit.
And they want to be president of the United States. When they say those two things, I know everything. I'll fix every problem. Vote for me.
Yeah, there you go. There's a term that has come up, and you're talking about familiarity relative to killers. And I know you've heard this, murder kit. Where they have a set of tools that they operate with. And we've heard this over and over again about serialized events.
Israel Keys. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. That and methodologies vary depending upon what the goal is. And you can think about a spree killer. Could a spree killer could they have a murder kit? Well, they put together a kit many times. If they got multiple weapons with them, they want fail safes, that sort of thing. Is that a murder kit? Yeah, possibly. But when you hear the term murder kit, you think about, well, they've got tape, they've got bindings, maybe they've got things to clean up with, and of course they've got weapons that they prefer, not something that's going to be a weapon of convenience. But look, I got to take you back in time. I was working. This goes back to, well, the main thing here is, we talked about the mass shooting that took place in Atlanta. I was senior investigator with the medical examiner's office in
1999 when this happened.
Yeah, in 1999, and what became known as the Buckhead massacre, and
wow.
And it was a weird time back then because just the week before the Buckhead massacre, we had worked another massive loss of life event in Southwest Atlanta that I think, and I'm going to get this wrong probably, but I think it's referred to as the Mechanicsville massacre. And we had a whole family that was wiped out in a tiny little home with one of the children surviving, an 11-year-old that had hid in a closet. And I actually got injured on that scene. I slipped, pulled a groin muscle. I was wearing a Tyvek suit, and there was so much blood in that house that when I put my foot down in the hallway, and they were old, hard heart pine floors that were polished, there was so much blood, Dave, that I slid and split the Tyvek suit and pulled a groin muscle all at the same time. And I'm wearing like a mask over my face. I've got a head cover on, gloves, that sort of thing. And I had to, get myself out of the house and retool, refit, and get back in, because even though I'd injured myself, there ain't nobody else to do the job. You got to get back in there. And I'll never
You only
forget
get
that.
one shot at it, man. You only get one
And
first
I
look.
I preach that all the time, so you got to live by your preaching, man, if that's what you're going to do. And you have to stay on. It doesn't matter. Now, I mean, if you lose an arm or something, you're
Right.
obviously, but if you can, because no one has the mindset that you do if you're the primary investigator on a scene and you've already seen everything. All right.
Every minute gets further and further
It
away
does.
from the moment it happened, which means it's a changed circumstance now. It's a changed situation.
It does. And then the next week we had the Buckhead massacre with
my
Mark
goodness.
Barton. And it wasn't, Dave, it wasn't just a single building. He migrated from one spot to another, just raining down hell. And we're talking about what was, and many people, particularly those that are much younger in our audience, are not even going to be familiar with this term. There's a term called day trading.
Oh, wow.
And you would go to a specific location where they had dedicated computers and you had to pay for time at this thing. And you would sit down and you would do trades like you were on the floor,
Right.
Up at one, and they had the tickers everywhere and all this sort of thing, but you were an individual doing this, and people would do their own LLCs, and just go to the terminal. It's a dedicated terminal, hardwired in, and you'd be trading all day long.
And that's what Mark Barton did. He actually was a day trader. He didn't start out that way. He did not start out with a goal of being a Wall Street day trader. By the way, when this happened, I remember how it was covered in the media by people like me. A lot of because for many of us, we had heard of day traders. If you remember back in the late 90s, there was a lot of fast happening on Wall Street and on the NASDAQ. There was so much happening because of the tech stocks. And
oh, yeah, they were everywhere.
We were on the front hand side of the bubble. And boy, it was like it
was a Wild West, man.
People were making hundreds of thousands of dollars with minimal investments. It was a huge time. And Mark Barton, in the summer of 99, this is 2 years before the bubble burst, just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
There were ups and downs, but a lot of people were making bank. And Mark Barton, whatever he chose, was the wrong way for a while. And he had a number of really down months financially as a day trader that brought him to a point of desperation. But Joe, I don't know that was the only reason. When we look back at his life, this man had gotten away with murder already. Before he ever pulled a gun on the people he blamed for losing money, he was already a murderer who hadn't been convicted.
And isn't that the fascinating thing about this? You talk about, we go on and on about people that walk into businesses and schools and all of these horrible just tragedies that happen. And people, now hold on to your hat here, Dave. I got to tell you, even though you're not wearing a hat, I'm looking at you right now. It's almost rote now, because it seems like every talking head in the media will always ask this question. They'll say, were there warning signs?
Oh, he was always such a nice guy.
Yeah. In this case, Dave, let me tell you something. There were warning signs, and those warning signs came in the form of a double homicide at the headwaters of the Coosa River in Cherokee County, Alabama.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, I wanted to go down this road with you about Mark Barton, because I was sitting here and I was thinking how the Buckhead massacre this summer, it will have been a quarter century since that happened. And I still, so I still remember all of my colleagues that were involved, there physically on the scene. We were back intaking the bodies at the morgue, trying to make sure that we could get people identified, because it's a total just frenetic mess. And it was horrible, these things that we were witnessing. But Dave, I got to tell you, when we found out about this suspect in the shooting, and that he also had 2 open homicides that had been laid at his feet, the authorities thought that, and they had happened 6 years earlier. Yeah. And that's the reason, I made the comment about, oh, gee, were there any warning signs? It's not like he's, running around the neighborhood naked and howling at the moon or anything. No, nothing quite that subtle. We're talking about somebody that went to a campground and killed his then wife and mother-in-law with a sharp instrument.
I was going to say allegedly. Because he was never convicted of that crime. He's dead now, and he was the only suspect they ever had. And the warning sign. I actually pulled this quote, Joe, because I wanted to. Yeah, it was. You're talking about his wife and her mother. It's Labor Day weekend. They're at Weiss Lake up in Cherokee County, Alabama, and his wife and her mother are murdered inside the trailer, and his father-in-law says, until the murders, Mark was the perfect son-in-law. Until the murders, Mark was the perfect son-in-law. So how did they die? Because there was no forced entry, right? No. Didn't it look like a robbery?
Yeah, and there was even jewelry and like $600 cash left behind. I don't know if it's
thieves don't do that, do they?
No, they generally don't. And also thieves that force. You think about forced entry and people, literally kicking in doors. I've had this happen. I've had people throw stuff through windows to gain access to individuals and murder them. All kinds of stuff like that you see out there. But anytime that we have no signs of forced entry, and that's always our qualifying remark. No signs of forced entry or struggle. You always hear that in every one of these police reports.
And I've always wondered, is it really that big, or is it a TV thing?
No, it's true. The TV world took that from us. It's a canned comment that is made throughout the country. I've come across it reviewing reports, but you're making a very broad assertion here. Okay. That upon my initial observation, this bloodbath that I wound up walking into, I didn't see any forced entry, or now as far as the struggle goes, there was blood that was essentially cast off all over the bathroom mirror, in this place. And here's the thing. They didn't find a weapon either, but they kept saying, I've heard people say that they were bludgeoned.
Yeah.
And I've had other people say that it was sharp force, and then I've heard hatchet. And this is, from a forensic standpoint, one of the things that you get with a hatchet or an axe is that when you start doing these strikes on an individual, it has let's see, how can I put this? It will have features sometimes of a blunt force. Okay. Because you're coming down. If you just imagine a hatchet right now, something that you buy at a big box store or whatever. It's got a single blade. And then you think about the back side of it. Okay. That back strap on it that's very weighted. That's the reason axes are made that way. They're like a gigantic steel wedge that you can drive through the air and cut something. Well, sometimes they get twisted. As this feverish thing that's going on, you're not always going to hit perfectly with that leading edge. So you'll get these big, nasty contusions. Now, you will get a leading edge there that's kind of clean if they can drive that edge through the body. And when you see, what's really impressive is you go down to the bone. And if you do like a microscopic section, a cross section of the bone when you're looking at it, Dave, the thing has got it looks like the V hull on a boat. It's got a perfect V shape in there, and it kind of trenches out. But then you'll get these little spiderweb fractures that run away from it. And so since they didn't leave a weapon at the scene, one was not recovered. I think that's where the pathologist at the time, back in '93, when they were doing the autopsies on both his wife at that time and the mother-in-law, they were thinking, hey, we don't have the weapon, but boy, this sure does look like an axe or a hatchet here, because you're going to get these two injuries that kind of communicate. But here's the big question, and you know me, brother, I hate the word why. I do. Let's say what would have been the motivation of Mark Barton killing these two women? Well,
they found out pretty quick what they think was the motivation.
I'll let you do this big reveal, because I got to tell you, you know what they say, the root, right? The root of what? So you go back and you think about the later day trading career that he was to have. The
love of money, friends. There were two things. One, as they began investigating, that no sign of forced entry. Okay, yep. I read this in the report on the police investigation. They found out, though, immediately, since there's no forced entry, who did they know that would have access? Okay, what kind of relationship does he have with his wife? And they were looking at his father-in-law, too, because, his wife's dead. And so they're looking at these guys, and lo and behold, they find out 4 days ago, Mark Barton took out $600,000 life insurance policy on his wife. Oh, my goodness. There's ding, ding, ding. Number one, Deborah Barton has $600,000 in life insurance. So they talk to the insurance company and find out, well, he actually wanted $1 million, but he couldn't cover the payment. So they settled for $600,000. That was their first tip-off of who their suspect might be. Now, taking it a step further, they looked at the crime scene. A purse had been dumped out of Eloise Spivey, the 59-year-old mother of Deborah Barton. Her purse is dumped out, and it's made to look like a robbery. The problem was, yes, there were a couple of pieces of jewelry missing, but there's an envelope with 6 $100 bills in it.
Yep.
And no robber in his right mind is leaving cash. It just ain't going to happen.
No, so, and most of the time when you get these kind of robberies, these home invasion kind of robberies like this, and there have been these things where you will have RV parks where you'll have like ne'er-do-wells. They're like camping out in the woods adjacent to it. Lots of times they're druggies.
Oh, yeah.
And these things are generally very violent. But, Bubba, let me tell you something. They're not walking out of that scene without everything of value. They're like vultures. They'll pick over everything. And so when you had pointed out, well, why would they leave cash behind? Jewelry's one thing. You got to take jewelry to either somebody that can fence jewelry or to a pawn shop. And that's going to catch people's eye. Cash.
Yeah,
if
buddy.
You got the greenbacks, baby. You can go spend that anywhere. You can go buy a pack of gum with it. And the next thing you know, you got $80 in cash. Well, I'll say 80. That'd be a lot of gum.
But thing is, you're walking. But you're spending it as you leave. You don't have to do anything. Cash is king. But when they start investigating, and again, they didn't solve it. They had a suspect in Mark Barton, but according to the investigators and the sheriff, everybody was looking at Mark Barton.
Yeah, they liked him for it.
The family everybody liked him for this crime. And, I still can't find out, Joe, and I have looked for this. His alibi was that he was home, Marietta, or just outside of Atlanta, with the 2 kids. 2 children, very small.
Very small.
Did he bring them with him?
There you go.
And leave them asleep in the minivan while he sneaks in the middle of the night and destroys his wife and her mother? And then, he's going to have to be covered in blood. How does he get out of the camper without being covered in blood, Joe?
It's bone chilling. And he would have had to have because listen, if you're going to attack somebody with a weapon like this, they're not just going to sit back and allow you to attack them. They're going to see it coming. They're going to throw up their arms. They're going to try to move out of the way. It's not like a static thing where, like if you've got, let's just use the example of an axe. You've got a piece of wood before you, or maybe you're chopping down the tree. Well, you can hit the tree as many times as you want. You can take chunks out of it. The tree ain't going to move.
Right.
Human beings, when they're hit with an edged weapon, trust me, those pain centers are firing. They're trying to get out of the way.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn sensational.
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
This is something, Dave, that has always held true in my career. I see, I'll think about it. I'll think about it when I'm because you're literally in the wake of these horrific events, and you're looking at it. And first off, you're thinking about the person. You're thinking, does your mind work? What were you thinking? And you see the through line in it sometimes, and you're thinking, okay, you're a deputy sheriff in a small rural community in Alabama. Can you imagine showing up at that RV park? Oh. And, most of the time you've got people, and it's the crappy capital of the world, I think they call it, up there on Lake Weiss. People come there to catch this specific species of fish, and they're everywhere.
The panfish, guys, just so you know.
Yeah, and
like a bluegill.
Like a bluegill, only gigantic. And so you've got starting in late February, March, and going into April, they're going on bed. And then there's another thing that happens in the fall. I'm not completely familiar with it. But anyway, the most you're going to, if you're going to say, do you have a fishing license? Or what are you doing here? Why are you drunk out here in public? Because they're going to camp out and all. But can you imagine being a deputy and you walk into this RV and the thing is bathed in blood, and this person's a ghost? They've just vanished into thin air. I'm not asking you to put on Mark Barton's hat here, but I got to ask you, what do you think his motivation? Well, I mean, what do you do with the rest of your life at that point in time?
After you've just destroyed your wife and her mother? You're talking about the mother of your children, by the way. I believe those two children in the car. I believe those two children were asleep. I believe that Mark Barton hopped back in his Ford Taurus, which was fairly new at the time, and stripped off whatever he wore to cover himself while he was in there. He wasn't a stupid guy, knew what it was like to wear lab stuff, and hopped out in the car and drove home. Yeah. And Mark Barton was the suspect. He was their only suspect. And there were some things that happened in the investigation. They brought him in. Now, father-in-law, who said he was great right up till the murders, great son-in-law. Mark Barton would not take a polygraph. So father-in-law, not happy about that. His wife and his daughter are dead, and the one guy won't take a polygraph. So
they're chewed to pieces.
Yeah,
they're absolutely. And the father-in-law had to go back. He had to see that RV.
There had to be
that's something he had to live with. So I can only imagine when this guy's refusing to take the polygraph. And here's another thing, and I can say this as being a papaw now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine what's going on in your mind as a grandfather? And you're thinking, this animal has my two grandbabies.
Yep. And that led to a battle, Joe. Actually, after the death, after police, the guy took out a $600,000 life insurance policy. His wife's now dead 4 days later after he takes that out. There was a battle. There was custody issues over the children. Mark Barton was the suspect. They couldn't pin it on him, Joe. The thing is, he was living in Lithia Springs, Georgia, and you had the Alabama officials out of Cherokee County, Alabama. Yep. They're investigating a murder there. But now you've got the Georgia officers are involved in the investigation because that's where he lives, and that's where evidence might be. Evidence might be in his car. Well, here's a problem, and I'm going to throw this out there because we got to move on. Alabama investigators, they get a search warrant for the car. They get his floor mats out from his car, but you know what? They got the floor mats because it looked like it had blood stains on it. They let him keep the car, Joe.
Yeah.
And said, just don't wash it or anything.
Just don't wash the car.
Yeah, don't clean your car. Don't do anything, and we'll be back later. So when they did come to get it, he had spilled Coke and everything else. Everything was destroyed in there that could have been any evidentiary value.
I'm thinking, then, I have to go back, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback these guys, I know, but you're thinking, and here's the thing, they found blood evidence in there, and this gives you an idea as to how far technology has advanced or since then. It gives you an idea what size these blood droplets were. Back then, during that period of time, if you wanted to do DNA typing, you probably would have had to have had a sample that would have been about the size of a quarter. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, this is pre-OJ trial, too, so we didn't even know about a lot of this.
Yeah, you didn't. I mean, we knew about it in forensics, obviously.
Yeah.
But the sample size had to be really robust, and you compare it till today. If we find the most minuscule
touch
amount.
DNA. Just touch something.
It can be tested. And
by the way, touch DNA might come up in the Koberger trial, just saying.
Yeah. Gee, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to come up.
But, Joe, I noticed that when they got the car back finally, the cops the gas and brake pedals had been thoroughly cleaned and recently conditioned with Armor All. Everything in that car, gone. Yeah. So it was no use. But the thing is, he was still the main suspect, and the police were fighting every which way they could. It was the police that actually helped the insurance company do battle with him. The insurance company didn't want to pay out. They did not want to pay out.
I think they had like a negotiated settlement.
They did.
And they had agreed. They had agreed at least to put like $125,000 in a trust for those kids. I think
it was a $600,000 policy. They negotiated it to $450,000, but $150,000 of this goes into a trust for your kids.
Yeah, $150,000.
You can have access to $300,000. Sign off on it, and we'll walk away. That's what they did. So, what did Mark Barton do? Well, first thing is, within a week of the funeral of his wife, the mother of his children, and her mother, Leanne Vandiver, a girl that he had met on his sales trips, when he was working as a salesman, she started spending days over there and nights over there at his house in Lithia Springs, the home where his wife had just been. Within 6 months, she moves in with him. So the girl that they suspected he was having an affair with, police did, moves in with Mark Barton within 6 months of the passing of his wife. Now, Leanne Vandiver was considerably younger than Mark Barton. At the time, in 1993, he was 38. Leanne Vandiver was, she would have been 21, and they've been dating for 2 years. So she was 19 when he's in his late 30s, and they're dating behind his wife's back. She moves in when she's 21 and he's 38, 39. So
yeah, I'm not a big fan of the term dating.
Yeah.
Dating implies,
when you're married?
Yeah. It's like, it implies something else. I mean, and
that is the wrong
this
term.
guy's a real scumbag, because he's running around on his wife with these two babies, and he, obviously butchers his wife and his, and his mother-in-law. And I'm thinking about this young woman, and she's an adult. She's made this decision to be with him. And I'm thinking, wouldn't you at least have an inkling of what he was in? What happened to your first wife? Where is she? I know you were married. What's the story? Well, now all of a sudden she's got an instant family, doesn't she?
Yep.
Because
he's retained to 2 kids.
Yeah, she's retained these kids. I mean, he's retained the kids.
Mm-hmm. Had to fight for them.
They're domiciled with him and her, to whom he gets married, and they leave Lithia Springs, which is, if you're not familiar with Atlanta, there's Marietta, which is kind of a big area. It's kind of to the northwest of Atlanta. Lithia Springs is even further west, and so that means it's closer to Alabama. You think about the pathway he would have taken getting from eastern Alabama, which is where Lake Weiss is, to Lithia Springs. It's very easily done. It's not a heavy lift.
Right. Even
on back roads, you could get there really, pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But, they leave there and they wind up going down to Stockbridge, Georgia, which is completely if you think about a clock face, and Atlanta's right in the center of it, Marietta is about at the 11 o'clock position.
Okay.
Lithia Springs is at about the 10 o'clock position.
All right.
Stockbridge is at about the 5 o'clock position. So it's on the other side of the clock face from where they were. So he moves, and again, it's another suburb.
Yeah.
It's along the I-75 corridor, just on the south side. He lived off of the I-75 corridor on the north side before that.
Okay.
So he can, and it's easy. I mean, it's a commuting distance from Atlanta. You're doing business in Atlanta. So he sets up,
he uses the money, the insurance money, to set himself up as a day trader. He takes, Joe, we noticed, we got it down to, he had $300,000 in that payout. He takes $294,000 of that money and puts it into his day trading account. He's going to be a big man on Wall Street. And oh my goodness, Joe, it didn't take long after he and Leanne Vanderveer, when she becomes Leanne Barton and stepmother to Matthew David Barton, who is, he's looking up to his, they were, both the kids were too young when their mother passed away. Right. Michelle was 2.5. David was 5. So they were very young, or Matthew David rather, very young when their mother passed away. Now they've got a stepmother and their dad, and stepmom is young. Now, in their first couple of years together, Joe, neighbors said it was pretty routine for her to leave and there to be a fight on the neighborhood street. Now, that's why I read some comments from neighbors the week of the massacre, talking about what kind of person Barton was. Go back and talk to him later on, and they're like, no, man, they were constantly fighting. She was always threatening to leave or leaving. She spent a lot of time. There was even discussion that by the time of July 27, 1999, Leanne Vanderveer was no longer living with Mark Barton all the time. And that's where he wakes up. July 27th, 1999, Mark Barton wakes up in his bed. His wife, Leanne, is there. And according to his own actions, his own words here, Mark Barton begins the killing spree. He kills his wife in her sleep. It says he bludgeoned her. He bludgeoned his second wife in her sleep. He stuffs her body in a closet in the master bedroom.
Yep.
And goes on about his merry way. Nobody knows about this on July 27th, that morning. The next day, July 28th, 1999, Mark Barton kills his children from his first marriage, Michelle, who was 8, and Mark David, who was 11. He kills both of them by beating them in the head with a hammer and then dunking their bodies in bathtub water to make sure they were dead.
They were drowned, yeah. Can I interject something here?
Please.
There was, when this occurred, and remember this occurred, it was like a 2.5 day period relative to the murder of his second wife, these kids, and then leading up to the Buckhead massacre, and eventually his own death. Mm-hmm. You come through an event like the massacre in Buckhead, where you've got 9 people that are essentially shot to death in 2 separate locations. And for those that aren't familiar with Buckhead, Buckhead is like the upscale area of Atlanta. Okay. Mm-hmm. You're young. You think that, you're going to be, the top of the heap, and that's where you would want to move. It's where all the clubs are and all that sort of stuff. So these 2 businesses are up there, and they're both day trading businesses. They're kind of across the street from one another. It was during that period, and I remember talking to a colleague of mine that was like the lead on 2 of these bodies. And I remember them saying at the time, Dave, that when we got the news after we had spent all day out at the scene processing the scenes, and these scenes are surreal, again.
Okay, now you're talking about in Buckhead at the,
at the scene. There was like this moment in time after they're done with this where they're told, oh, by the way, the bodies of his current wife and his 2 children have been found, beaten to death, and stacked in a closet. And it's like, I'm just talking about from an investigative perspective here, Dave. When this occurred, if you didn't think that the wind had already been taken out of your, and you're emotionally drained because you are after working scenes, because they're very intense. And keep in mind, when the shooting took place, this is hours and hours before Mark Barton would die himself. You think that you still have and they did. You still got a madman on the loose. You're going to have to push this through all the way through, work the scene, do the autopsies, collect all of the evidence that you can, and then hopefully they're going to catch this guy and prosecute him. Well, that's the mindset they were in, and they're thinking, oh my God, there's 3 more bodies down in Henry County, which is where Stockbridge is, and that was worked by a separate agency along with the GBI.
So
it's hard to take the measure of it, is what I'm saying.
We know that he kills his wife in her sleep, then he kills the children while they're sleeping, and then the 27th his wife, 28th the kids, then the 29th is when he goes into town, and where he has, by the way, he's lost his money. The money's gone.
Yeah.
He had blown $100,000 in the last couple of months. He shows up at the first place that he did a lot of trading at was Momentum Securities. At Momentum Securities, he had been there twice that week, and they were like, you had a margin call. You got no money. He writes a $50,000 check to open up his account so they get trading again, and it bounces. So they're like, no, you can't do that. Well, when he shows up, they know him because he has been trading with them. When he shows up on the day of the 29th, he walks in and he's talking. He's talking to people like everything's just fine, just normal. Yeah. And then he pulls out guns, Joe. Now, so far, we know that allegedly he kills his first wife and her mother with a hatchet or something in a very confined area and leaves. He's killed his second wife and his own children with a hammer and leaves. So you would think he would stay along that same line, that he would use a hammer or something and start beating people, but he doesn't. He actually breaks out the guns when he gets at Momentum Securities.
I think that this is evidence of, and this is kind of obvious, I know, but it's evidence of an escalation relative to how much havoc and how much hell can I wreak upon this world that I hate so badly.
Oh, wow.
Because I have been robbed. So I'm going to try, and, look, blunt force is brutal. We know that. Sharp force is brutal, but it's hardly efficient. Okay. Medieval times, they fought with blunt objects and they fought with swords. We've moved now to firearms. He shows up with two semi-automatic
If you're in a
pistols.
camper or in a neighborhood home,
right,
people are going to hear a gunshot and remember it.
Yeah.
Not going to hear a hit to the head with a hammer.
No,
hear a child cry.
Yeah, you would. And I think they, with his children and his second wife, he ran that risk because they were living in an apartment. If you've ever, I'm sure everybody in our, sound of our voice have at least been in an apartment. Right. You can hear what's going on the other side of the walls. Yeah. I hated living in apartments. Anyway, but that's the nature of it. Look, when you show up with firearms like this and you're going into a business establishment here, you're purposed at that point. And I don't want to forget people in this, because we've got 9 victims of the shooting by itself. But Dave, I think there were double-digit people that were injured in addition to this in the office parks here. So he's raining down havoc in this environment. People are scurrying everywhere. There's a classic image. You can see him leaving on a CCTV camera footage. He's like, it's a still shot. It's black and white.
Leaving Momentum Securities?
Yeah. And he's wearing like a white T-shirt, pair of shorts, pair of tennis shoes or whatever. Very, like if you saw him, he's not going to look like, some kind of ogre coming out of the past, or somebody that lives under a bridge and eats billy goats. You're talking about somebody that just looks like John Q. Public that walks in here, and it's Satan incarnate at this point in time. I think, later that same night, they tracked him down. He tried to kidnap a girl
Back
as well.
Back up a minute, Joe. So he goes into Momentum Securities. He kills 4, wounds others. He then walks across the street to Alltech Investment Group, makes some small talk with the receptionist there. Nobody knows what just happened at Momentum. Nobody knows that his wife and kids are dead. Nobody knows any of that's going on. And he breaks out the guns and starts firing now. This all happened very quickly. The murders at Momentum and then the shooting that takes place at All Tech Investment Group, where 5 people are murdered there, right? Because you had a total of 9 people murdered. I don't know totals on how many people were wounded. People that are still mentally, emotionally scarred for life. So he leaves there. Now, this is when he hops in his minivan and takes off, and they get him. Are they chasing him right off the bat, Joe?
They're looking for him, and everybody knows what he's driving. And I remember that going out on the air. They're looking for this minivan. I think it was white. And so you're going to put out an APB, the All Points Bulletin, and that he's not going to stay in the city.
They knew his name, though, didn't they? Because people that survived knew him at these trading places.
That's Mark Barton. Mark O. Barton. I think his middle name is Oren or something like that. And so they know who this guy is. It's not like he's somebody that walks into a big department store just off the street. He's gone to a place that he's familiar with and that is familiar with him.
Right.
And he begins to rain down this terror. And it's at that moment in time as he's fleeing, and I'm not really clear about the dynamics, but I know that if memory serves me correctly from that day, he had made an attempt to kidnap a girl to get her into the vehicle with him, to kind of take a hostage, I guess, as a shield or something like this. And she bolted.
It's funny
I think.
When you mentioned the APB. Okay.
Yeah.
There was 4 hours of searching for him from the time he left All Tech Investment Group. They knew who they were looking for. They knew what he was driving. 4 hours of Metro Atlanta and surrounding areas terrorized by a guy who has just shot up 2 different businesses. They don't know what's coming next. They're looking for him, and that's when he ends up in Kennesaw. Now, where's Kennesaw in relation to Buckhead? Yeah,
if you think about Kennesaw is, you remember how I mentioned Marietta earlier? Mm-hmm. Well, you have to go past if you think about I-75 that runs northwest.
Okay.
As you're leaving out of Atlanta, you're going to first pass Marietta, and then you're going to go up even further, and you're going to get to Kennesaw.
Okay.
And so Kennesaw is further north, and so he's cruising along. The police are on him. He pulls over into a service station. It's already dark outside by this time.
He tries to take that young girl hostage.
He did, and they wind up surrounding. She bolted. Thank the
she
Lord.
Got away, and she called police. They didn't know he was there.
Right.
They didn't know. They were looking. They were all looking for Mark Barton in the white minivan. They didn't know where he was exactly until that girl. She's a hero because there's no telling. He was trying to take her hostage to maybe be a negotiation, a shield. I don't know. But she calls the police and say, I got him. Here he is. And they were there. Right on top of it. And they did surround him that night. They've got police surrounding the vehicle, and he makes the decision, to put the weapon to the side of his head and kill himself. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.